We all love our hot rods, classic cars, and street machines. We want to make them faster, louder, and perform better. I've been there with my El Camino. I've been making upgrades in the name of performance for a very long time. But the problem is some of those upgrades that may look good on paper actually make this thing an absolute bear to drive on the street. So let's talk about some of the mods that I'm guilty of that'll take your street car from a comfy car to becoming a compromised, uncomfortable pain in the butt to drive. And we're talking about mods that are supposed to be fun, but really aren't. Starting in the back of the car. This is probably one of the ones that made the car the hardest to drive, and believe it or not, it's actually a step up from where it was. I'm talking about a spooled rear end. Now, I put a spool in the back of this car because I've been chasing traction. I want to make sure that both tires are turning at the same time for maximum grip. But the problem is that when you do that, it makes it very hard to turn. Now, why do I say this is a step up? Because in a previous rear end, I had a mini spool. A mini spool is clunky, thunky, it's awful, it just absolutely sucks to even drive. The spool, by comparison, is absolute butter, but that doesn't mean the spool makes it easy to drive. You go at a low speed into a turn, the rear tires tend to fight and hop over each other and make all sorts of squawk noises. It's a mess. The alternative is to put a really good posi or even a locker if you're concerned about. For a little while, I actually ran a locker in this before I blew it up, but the locker actually made it a pretty well-mannered vehicle at low speeds. The second thing that took this street manners away from this El Camino is the rear gears that I chose. It's got 411s in there now, and there's a lot of vehicles that came from the factory with 410, 411 gear sets. But that's actually kind of a more of a curse than a blessing when you don't have an overdrive transmission. What it means is about 65 miles an hour, you're turning 37, 38, 3900 RPM going down the road. It's not fun. It sucks fuel like an ocean liner and it drones on after a long time, to be totally honest. So when I bought this car in its stock form, it came with 241 rear gears and a turbo 350. It worked great down the road. The thing would do 75, 80 miles an hour without even thinking twice, but that's not good for performance. I could 8th mile in one gear all the way through first. So in the name of performance, I went to 411 gears, and it performs a lot better, but absolutely sucks to drive on the highway. The alternative to those really steep gears involves gear vendor's overdrive transmission, or picking a gear set that actually works for your car. If you're actually going to drive the car, 323s, 355. Beautiful set of gears. 373s if you're really feeling it. But I had 373s in here once upon a time, and it was starting to get a little unmanageable at that point. The next mod, in good conscience, I can't tell you to do in any car that you own because it makes it crappy to drive. Turndowns in the exhaust. Why would you ever do that? The exhaust is meant to clear the body and takes a lot of the drone out to the side of the car to annoy everyone else around you, but it makes it a lot more comfortable for you to drive. But turndowns are actually kind of a pain because the sootiness of the exhaust gets all over everything. The rear differential, the back half of the car, forget it. If you're going to put turndowns on something, just do yourself a favor and don't. The far better option is to make it clear the body, whether you do it in front of the rear wheel or behind the axle. Either way works. Word of caution about having the exhaust point straight back off the tail of the car is you kind of get this tumbling effect, and depending on the shape of the car, it can actually make the back of the car a little exhaust sooty. So if you're going to do it, I would personally go out to the side of the car, but that's my own personal preference. Now, I am a sucker for huge tires that fill out the wheel well of the car. But the problem is that when you do that and literally take it to the max, and when I say take it to the max, really going too far, it doesn't go so well on the road. What I mean by that is when you stuff a gigantic tire under here, as the suspension articulates and does its things, those massive tires are going to rub on everything. The frame, the wheel well. It kind of takes some of the fun out of it when you're having to think so far ahead that every turn is like, is that bump going to make the thing scrub the frame? And have I scrubbed the frame too many times? Am I going to cut a tire down? And believe me, I speak from experience. I actually had an incident where I cut a tire down because I was trying to fit far too much tire in the wheel well. Needless to say, I learned my lesson just a little bit and went to a much more sensible tire. And by sensible, I mean it's like a size, 2 sizes smaller, and is still too big for the car. But you can at least drive it in thinking 1 turn ahead instead of 3 turns ahead. The alternative, as much as we love having a giant tire that fills out the wheel well, pick a size that makes sense to drive. Let's face it, in most situations, we're not looking for 100% traction every moment of every day. You don't have to have that gigantic meat under there. You can get by with something a lot smaller and sensible that actually does the job. And by a lot, I mean correctly sized, not that. The next upgrade that's actually more trouble than it's worth is those race car MSD style ignitions, the big capacitive discharge boxes. The thing that people don't tell you is that, yeah, they make a great deal of spark energy, but the level of complexity and troubleshooting issues that you may have because of it, it can turn into a nightmare very quickly. MSD has a known problem where the connector, the little bullet points, they don't seem to stay together nicely in the connector, and they tend to work their way out, especially if you have to undo it for maintenance, put it back together when you're done, and then find the car doesn't start. That's an absolute pain to troubleshoot. There's connections all over this thing that are actually part of my maintenance list if I have to check them pretty regularly to make sure that they don't have problems. Those MSD boxes also lead to a problem where you start buying doodads and bits and bobs to make it perform better. I've got the MSD, I've got the rev limiter with 3 adjustable steps, I've got the tach adapter, I've got a start retard hiding out up there. It snowballs very quickly. And now that I think about it for a second, I've probably got over $1,000 into the ignition of this car for a vehicle that probably doesn't need it. The alternative to those big capacitive discharge ignitions is something like MSD makes a drop-in module for the HEI that actually works really, really well. I've used it on this car before that MSD ignition. I've used it on other cars. Beautiful setup. The other one that's pretty cool that's available right now is a thing called a progression ignition. It's a company that makes a distributor that drops right into place like a distributor does, but you can control it with your phone. By an app, you can control the advanced curves, possible rev limiters, and various other functions. Those are actually pretty darn cool right now, and probably a better option for most street cars than the full tilt MSD setup. This next upgrade is one of those ones that I actually put in a lot of time and effort to do. And it's right here, the manual brake setup. This car originally had the big power brake booster and performed just fine, but in my infinite wisdom, I decided I wanted to go with a manual brake setup to shave weight, to make it simpler, just to, have more space on the firewall. What I didn't realize is that took me down the road of requiring 2 different master cylinders before I got it right, and it's still not 100% right. It led to a little bit less confidence-inspiring brake feel. And I'm sure that if I did it one more time, I would get it right. But when you're making all these upgrades, you don't think about some of the possible issues you're going to run into. The manual brakes, and especially if you're going to be driving the car on the street, and it's got perfectly fine power brakes, whether vacuum assist or hydro boost, that's probably a far more comfortable brake system to drive than the manual setup. One more thing to think about with the brakes. If you're swapping rear axles around, whether you're going from whatever's in there originally to a 9-inch or something that wasn't ever there from the factory, getting those swap brake conversions. Make sure you get one of the parking brake, because that's just one of those nice street-going things to have, and a lot of places are going to require it to get through a state inspection, so it's just easier to have it, even if you never need it, but that time you do, you may sure be glad you did. This is one that I had to learn the hard way. Braided Lines. They look freaking cool, and they may get you in there with the, hey, this is really easy to assemble and disassemble for maintenance. And the truth of the matter is, they are. However, with this car right now, this very moment, the transmission cooler lines that I installed, probably 10-ish years ago, the rubber line is starting to deteriorate, and it's actually weeping through the braided hose. And believe me, that actually took a fair bit of effort to try and find, because it's a braided hose. It tends to wick oil all the way up and down the braiding. So, as cool as they are, there's a time and a place for them, and if you're going to do it, make sure you spend the time to figure out what you need. As an example, I've got a lot of rubber braided stuff. This is PTFE, or this is a Teflon, basically tube. That means it's going to be more safe for various fluids. Where ATF tends to degrade the rubber over time, it's going to do that much slower with the PTFE. Now you'll notice I said much slower because hard lines never really go bad unless they get pinched, maimed, or broken. And I'm actually honestly giving some serious thought to making some junction braided lines that go from the transmission over to the frame and basically hardline it all the way up to the transmission cooler. Now, people are going to say, well, why don't you just use rubber line? Well, for one, that's not NHRA accepted. And two, you ever see those cars and trucks that have the rubber line all the way from the fuel pump to the carburetor? Ick. Absolutely ick. That is the wrong way to do it. Do a hard line, do a braided line correctly, but don't do the black rubber line, and especially don't use those little glass filters that cause problems. Another word of caution, if you choose to use a stainless overbraid, make sure you think about how you're running those lines, because that stainless overbraid is actually extremely abrasive. It'll eat through the insulation of wires like no tomorrow. I've got a clean spot on the frame where the braiding has actually vibrated just enough. Now I'm going to fix that when I redo them again, but be aware of where you're running these lines so that way it doesn't chew through things. One more thing that often people say you shouldn't do is to use a transmission cooler that's too big. I would beg to differ, that unless you're in a very, very cold climate, at which point your classic cars probably aren't being driven at that time, but your transmission needs to stay cool. That's one of those things that having a big external cooler can make a huge difference. Now, there are internal coolers to the radiator, and those can get by for a very stock application. My 3.8 Buick Regal has one of those, and it's getting by. But if you're doing anything performance, higher stall torque converters, you're putting bigger power to it, or even if you're towing or doing anything performance oriented, having a big cooler, and I would say get the biggest one that you can comfortably fit in the place that you have available to put it. Get the biggest transmission cooler you can put. It will keep your transmission alive. On a fun side note, that external trans cooler is probably the only thing that's kept the 4L60 in my 2005 Yukon from being an absolute box of neutrals. And as an anecdote, look at that. More stainless braided line misuse. It runs from the internal to the radiator transmission cooler all the way out here to the far side to the big transmission cooler hiding behind the grill there. Braided lines are cool when used responsibly. So yeah, having a transmission cooler that's as big as you can possibly fit is probably a good thing and may save your transmission, especially if you've got something unique that's a little hard to get parts for. So the moral of the story here is to be honest with yourself and what you're going to use your car for. Is this something that's going to be a fun cruiser? Then keep it fun and enjoyable. Make it very easy to get into and drive and enjoy. Is it going to be more of a purpose-built race car, kind of like what my El Camino has turned into? Then by all means, go for the hardcore heavy-duty upgrades, and it'll have the street manners that it has. Now, someone's asked me a few times, do you ever regret doing what you did to your El Camino? I said, occasionally. But you know something? I'm happy with it as a bracket car. And every once in a while, I do wish it had better street manners to go take my son somewhere, to go enjoy on the roads. But you know something? Those opportunities are a little few and far between, and I got other fun cars that can do that job just fine. So, do I wish it was different than it is? Nah. If anything, I wish it was more wild, but we're getting there, one little bit at a time. So, build for the car that you want, not go for the absolute race car setup if you can help it. But if you want the absolute race car, do it, because it's fun too. Anyways, guys, what upgrade do you think I missed that should have been on the list? Thanks for watching. We'll catch you later.